It's a very handsome camera.
Are you in love with that camera, Charlie?
No, it's just a handsome design. There's something pleasing about.
Whoa! Oh wait, I was gonna sing Dreamweaver, but I can't because we'll get sued. Okay, just listener, we have one. If you're hearing this, Charlie just fell in love with Brent's camera, and Dreamweaver started playing.
Accurate. Very accurate.
Magically. You need a licorice dispenser.
I was gonna say it's the scene from Wayne's World, just like suddenly like magnetically like flying toward it.
Wait, I have an idea. Y'all talk amongst yourselves.
What type of camera is that, anyways?
It's a Fuji.
It is a Fuji. Okay.
Yeah, it's like 2 years old.
Nice.
And welcome to Delusions of Camera Love. Wait, it's automotive grandeur, like glands? Grandeur. Automotive. No one can say that. Is that actually the name? We would like to begin today's show with a shout out to listener Samantha Simmons IV of Richmond. On behalf of all of the staff and employees of DAG Show, we would like to sincerely apologize for Charlie's comment about your ailing father. That was unprofessional and unbefitting of the dignity and seriousness with which we approach each show. As restitution for yet another violation of his parole, Charlie has been ordered by the Albemarle County Court to drive a Volkswagen GTI as punishment. Slow and low. That's how it go. So this next segment,
Little Beastie Boys intro.
For legal purposes, I can't confirm or deny that.
Okay, that's good.
Anyway, so this next segment occurred to me a while back, and I thought it might be kind of interesting for our listener. That there are cars out there that are cars that are underrated, cars that people say, oh my God, that's really a classic, and at the time people don't think it, and they can be kind of obscure, but they can be really cool and have really interesting, just sort of really interesting approach to what it is to be a car. It doesn't have to be fast or anything, just something interesting and unusual. Like the other day, I texted you guys a picture of that weird Volvo from the 50s. It was like a Volvo 1900, like race car looking two-door sedan or roadster thing they made like 50 of or something. So something obscure that's maybe so obscure people don't even know it exists. And I figured the three of us could go through it and kind of try to pick something out that we feel sort of meets that description. And I'm going to go first because I'm superior as a human being. Wow, silence.
Age before beauty?
I have no comment to that. So the first car I'm going to talk about, a good friend of mine had one of these. He lived in a small town and had a pretty successful business, and part of that was such a really interesting family and just quality through and through people that you don't want the appearance of sort of showing off your wealth in a town that's not doing fantastically economically. And so he decided to, his family had always been into Toyotas, and he decided that he wanted to get, a Toyota, just, whatever. But he was sort of, young at the time, and he was like, fresh out of medical school and really wanted to have something exciting. And so he didn't know cars as well as I did, but I ended up realizing that there was the perfect model for him. And it's a car that, again, it's so underrated that it's actually kind of unknown in a way. And it's not a car that most people really even know exists. And that is the technical name is the E120 Toyota Corolla XRS. Now, many of you have seen a Corolla S that has like the body kit along the ground, the spoiler and stuff, and it looks sporty. Oh, they can see the air quotes. And but this is something else entirely. And to the we only have one listener, so statistically the likelihood that they know what this car is basically nothing. But the Corolla XRS was just the standard four-door Corolla that was made probably like 2003 to 2008-ish, or whatever. That's that sort of standard body style that we all remember, the hopelessly generic kind of thing. But this one is really cool because, ladies and gentlemen, it has the same engine as the Toyota Celica GTS and the Lotus Elise in a Corolla, and that's with a 6-speed manual, lowered suspension. According to the source, the infallible source of accuracy in the world, Wikipedia, it was 170 horsepower and it revved to like 7,600 RPMs, again, in a Corolla, and only had 127 pounds of torque, which actually, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. So now the question is, you mentioned that it was in the Lotus.
Mm-hmm.
Now the question is, it's more that the Lotus shared the engine with it, as opposed to it sharing it with the Lotus.
That is a very accurate observation.
Just wanted to throw that out there because, like, that's one of the things of like, it'd be one thing if it was like, oh, designed by Lotus, put in a Toyota.
Yeah.
Other way around makes a little more.
Well, and because we're trying to educate people,
apparently
according to Wikipedia, which again is the infallible source of accuracy, it's the model is the ZZE131. Was available for only the 2005 and 2006 model years, which again is why it's so rare. I mean, and it blends in exactly with the Corolla S that you see out there, except it says XRS on it. And it is the 2ZZGE motor, which might mean something to someone. And it uses a cable throttle, unlike an electronic throttle like the Celica. So that's my unusually weird car that people don't know exists. There was a high-performance Corolla. Underrated because no one knew it existed.
Yeah.
2 years only Corolla, and it was pretty expensive at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like my Fiesta now. Like when I bought my Fiesta, the manager of the place was like, "Someone wants to spend $21,000 on a Fiesta? Okay."
Yeah, sure.
You know, it was sort of the same thing. And by the way, there was only one in the entire state of Louisiana where I lived at the time, so you had to drive like hours to go get it. And the manager was pretty happy to sell it
because he was like, "Oh, thank God, this was taking up a slot in our inventory. Now we can put a F-150 in it and sell it tomorrow."
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. Do you want to go next or?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm just going to wing it this one because I actually changed my mind halfway through listening to Stevens, as it happens. I'm going to have to say underrated performance for what it is probably the Volvo 850. It's the classic Volvo that everyone thinks of as soon as they think of a Volvo, if it's not thinking of a 240.
What years was this? This is like 88 to 95 or something?
It's like, what is it, 88 to 90.
Oh, okay.
Something or other. I think they switched over to this, the 850 series eventually became the V70 series. They switched nomenclature, like late 90s. So like, for instance, the Volvo that Helen has is a V70 cross country. That would be the successor to the 850.
So what makes it so special?
I mean, it's kind of a sleeper. It's still a 5-cylinder. You could get this sporty model with the 850R, which I think had slightly more power, slightly better trim. And there's a really cool story about how Paul Newman and Letterman bought a pair of 850 wagons and swapped them in with I think it was a Chevy.
No, I think it was a 5.0.
Was it a 5.0?
302, yeah.
But I love this story because it's such a like odd, like a car person's sense of humor of like, oh, wouldn't it be funny to have a Volvo wagon with a big V8 in it? And
didn't they do a comedians in cars getting coffee?
I think they might have. Yeah, it might have been Letterman's episode.
Yeah.
I know Letterman like talks about it.
Yeah.
He's talked about it on a few different platforms before, and it's just like one of those like inside jokes of like, man, what a time to like. I would love to be the fly on the wall in like that conversation because apparently it was all like initiated over a phone call from Newman to Letterman.
So what was the model again? The 850.
850.
So what engine did it have, and what made it like exciting?
I couldn't even tell you engine.
Yeah.
But I mean like. Everything. I mean, Volvo put together they had a British touring car championship team at one point, and there are some great images of like the blue and white Volvo livery, going, 2 wheels up in the air, 2 wheels on the ground. Just it's a flying wagon going around, racing around a bunch of other like saloon spec cars, and it's just the silliest, most wonderful thing. It's like I feel like it kind of like encompasses all those like weird car people things that they like. It's like you could have a 850 with rear-wheel drive, and it had 5 cylinders, so it makes like
that's really weird for the time.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, like all these things, and it was there's the whole I think we talked about this last time about like they had the clip of the 850s going off of the sides of bridges as like that. Oh,
There's
there's
a
our
parking
safety.
garage.
Yeah, there's our
Yeah.
safety ratings right there. We can go off a bridge and still roll away.
I just remember 850s. Like my friend's family got them when I lived in Houston, and they had the rear facing seats in the trunk and the station
Yeah.
wagon. And we used to just make faces at everyone
Oh,
behind
yeah.
us. But Volvo. We'll talk about this. Would be a great another segment too. I think Volvo, with the tradition of that, we opened this segment. We're talking about that 1900 model and how they used to have these 2-door roadsters and things.
Mm-hmm.
And Volvo has their Polestar arm or whatever it is, which I think is a really weird name. But and they do occasionally exciting cars, but I think it's totally a void in their lineup to do something all out performance, and I think that would be pretty interesting. But that's a cool.
Now with the the new V60 Polestar that just debuted a few days ago.
Okay,
they're only gonna make like
a
handful of them, so they're gonna be.
What's the perception of the brand?
Yeah,
again, that's another segment. That's
yeah.
But we should definitely talk about that. I think it'd be kind of cool. That's a cool choice. We've got the Volvo 850 and the E120. I now know the name of it. Corolla XRS.
It sounds more European when you put it as the E120.
Like what other brand does kind of letters and numbers together?
Hmm.
Anyway, so I think we'll move on to the distinguished gentleman.
What you got?
De la Combs.
I'm gonna go with the Toyota MR2.
Nice.
Ooh,
yes, the Mr.
Any
2.
particular generation or just the whole thing?
I would say late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, there was one at the track yesterday, and
excellent.
Is that the one that almost hit the fragment of the bumper into your face?
no.
That was awesome.
The sound of that is very satisfying.
It really was. No, I don't know. You don't see them around at all.
Agreed.
Much. I mean, we got the one that shows up, the red one that shows up, and the kid with the white one, right?
There's a black one. I remember that
black
one.
I know he was showing up last year.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him this year.
I've seen around town. I've seen about of that, or at least of that generation, probably 3 total.
3,
which is amazing to see them out and about.
Yeah, there's not much around.
Yeah,
overall.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're talking rear engine, rear wheel drive, complete death trap with about 5,000 horsepower. I mean, you can't go wrong there.
And it's a goddamn go-kart on the road.
Yeah,
right?
no, I think that's a really, really good choice because they're not ridiculously expensive.
No.
I think they sort of suffered with maybe some sort of like, my Mustang, my 60s Mustang has the cowl issue where they're kind of easy to rust there. So they have this particular mechanical fault. And I remember on Wheeler Dealers, they did an MR2, and there's a lot of issues with like rainwater being directly above the engine and the electronics, and you got to make sure that that's sort of lined up. So, is there anything else you wanted to say about that?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. I mean, I think overall that's a different car that nobody sees around much, and yeah.
All right. So
that's a good choice. That's always there.
I want one actually.
I mean, what was it? I guess Jalopnik had a video not too long ago where they like brought one back like with maybe like a few hundred miles on the odometer and took it for a spin, and we're floored at how like that type of performance is not,
especially with like modern tires.
Yeah,
and
I mean, like
they didn't have then.
Absolutely. I mean, that's if not already considered a future classic, that should definitely be on the line to be considered.
So for underrated cars that maybe you should consider or look into or just out of curiosity learn about, you have the E120 Corolla XRS. That's the 6-speed manual high revving car, which Lotus borrowed the engine from. We have the Volvo 850, which is a late 80s interesting car with a whole bunch of different options and ways to make it exciting, and it's sort of on the radar. It's not something I just remember the backwards facing seats and think it was the greatest thing on earth.
Put a V8 in it.
Put a V8 in it.
That's the answer.
Or like the guy in Cars and Coffee with the V12 and the BMW. And then we have Brent with the rear-engined MR2.
All good choices.
Yes, mine's the best.
We can all debate that later, but I think it's a good one. So, how did I get to this point where I'm on a podcast talking about my experience with cars? Well, I guess everyone has that story of how they get into the cars, and like so many of these stories currently, I'd say it probably can be traced back to my dad. My dad was a shipyard electrician at Norfolk Naval. He was pretty good at it. He ended up taking jobs as when I was a kid as a specialist on a travel team, and particularly specializing in like elevator systems on naval ships. And as that specialist, he traveled a bunch for long periods of time. I remember one particular year he, was gone for probably 6 to 9 months of that year, and he was, would be stationed anywhere from Italy to Japan and every naval base in between. We try and keep up with car maintenance while I was away, but there's always something. Usually it's not too much of a problem, but it became a bit more of a challenge when there were 4 cars and only the 3 people in our family, myself, my brother, and my mom, to really take care of them. Somehow or other, oil changes always lined up on top of each other, or someone needed new brake pads, or a battery had died, and kind of one of us had to be out there to fix it, or take it into a shop. But my dad would come back and kind of pick up right where he'd left off, or whatever car needed his attention first, and he'd always say something along the lines of, "Just keep getting up." That was kind of his mantra for those weekend projects. Just keep getting up. And I remember those weekend projects with my dad always somehow relating back to something with a motor. He had an old van, then he had a truck, my mom's car, that became my car, my brother's car, fishing boats, mowers, you name it, he worked on it. He seemed to know how to fix just about anything with a motor. I remember hearing old stories from my mom about how he had worked at a van shop at one point or other, and that's kind of how he learned so much. He didn't talk much about it, but it kind of made sense. He had a brown Chevy van with 80s era carpeting and a port window, and in my child mind, it lined up. I remember riding in the back of that van with no seat belts, no seats, no seat belts, right? And I remember learning how he had owned a Mustang at one point or other, and that maybe he had wrapped it around a tree and was kind of lucky to walk away from it. There'd always been a little more to learn about my dad, and he's not exactly the forthcoming type. Like, for instance, how did he instinctively know how to fix so many little things on a motor, or always have the right tool for the job? I imagine a lot of it came from a mechanical sense he'd picked up at the shipyard, but of course also the secret being a well-read Haynes manual always seemed to be in the background as well. And anytime he'd leave on travel, he'd joke about what projects he'd be coming home to, and what was in front of him when he got back. And he had this stubborn way of not being able to back down from a project, even if it was a difficult one. It's crazy to think how he had everything to do with my car habit. One of my first car projects was installing a new head unit in the Honda Accord that had been passed down to me, with his assistance, of course. The factory tape deck had eaten its last tape, or tape adapter, more likely, because it was the late 90s, and it was finally time for an upgrade. I think I bought a Sony Xenon single-din CD player and a retrofit kit to install. And I think it might have played MP3 disc, but at this point, that car went through a few head units, so it's hard to recall. But I remember it being the coolest thing. I remember me and my dad pulled the head unit, and I watched him meticulously splice in this new harness. I seem to remember him losing the directions, or maybe not following them at all, and manually testing which speakers were controlled by which wires. I remember troubleshooting the harness to get the antenna to retract and extend correctly. Again, maybe having to do with losing those instructions, or possibly not following them whatsoever. I said, and maybe a year later, my dad and I also spent a weekend replacing that worn carpeting in that Honda to refresh the car in preparation for it becoming my daily driver and first vehicle proper. I learned that early lesson where aged plastics never fit quite right once removed. And if you're willing to take something apart, you're willing to live with the consequences of maybe it goes back together perfect, maybe it develops a little more character. There are plenty of other projects that we worked on together, but those were just a few to name them. And he was there when I bought my first car from a dealership, came up from my childhood home 3 hours away and kicked tires at a CarMax. Thanks, Dad. This was after a series of unfortunate events that ultimately led to the demise of that previously mentioned Honda Accord. More on that probably in another segment, I'm sure. It'll come up. He eventually signed off and co-signed on the loan. Again, thanks, Dad, for that. And, of course, little did we know that was a Dieselgate VW. And, again, story for another time. And, of course, the first thing I went out and did to that VW Jetta was install a new Bluetooth unit to get the head unit working fully so I could listen to the latest streaming audio from Bluetooth, using all those little skills that he taught back in the day. Because it was a 2010 Jetta, you had to run the wiring from the back of the head unit all the way from a module in the backside of the unit through the passenger dash and underneath the passenger seat, of course, requiring disassembly between all the bits in between. So here I am, about 15 years or more older and maybe a little wiser. And now my phone calls to my dad usually turn to which one of us was working on what project. It's always a project for both of us, and more often than not, at least one of them car related. I've inherited a little bit of his stubbornness, all of the DIY spirit, a willingness to bust knuckles in my free time, and a slow but steady receding hairline. But it's a good thing. I realize I'm lucky to have gotten set down this path by my dad, and as so many others have. Lucky to have that drive to want to fix what's broken in front of me or never leave something as just good enough. Thanks, Dad, and thanks to all the other parents out there putting in that good time and good work to inspire those future generations of gearheads or car enthusiasts, whatever you want to call them. And if you're not a parent out there inspiring, know that you can still be that person inspiring the next generation. It just takes a few turns of the wrench.
So we are, we're obviously on Delusions of Automotive Grandeur here, which I slurred my speech because I've had 1 1/4 beers and it's all downhill from here. But our guest today is GTI Ben Kenobi, and as you will forever be known, we tend to not use last names on this show so that you can remain, for that thing you're doing this summer, which I can't talk about, so you can remain stealthy, secret agent man.
I appreciate that.
Okay, yes. So you are GTI Ben Kenobi, and for listeners that may think that he is pinching his nose while he is talking, why are you talking like this?
Steve decided that it was a good idea for me to smell the inside of his
Please elaborate and get to the point. The noun soon. People are gonna be like, "What are you smelling?" The inside of my what?
Jesus. The inside of a guitar case.
Yes,
from the late 1960s. That from his what year is it? 69 Les Paul Custom.
Yeah, that's it. My baby.
I smelled it and said it smells like an old violin case because I've played violin for the past 12 years. But I think I may have caught some illness from it. Polio, maybe.
It's definitely polio, but we were talking about this earlier, that it's sort of like when the people would go into those Egyptian tombs for the first time, and they'd be exposed to, like, bacteria that humans hadn't experienced in, like, 4,000 years.
Yeah, like, those antibodies have long evolved out.
This is going to be GTI Ben Kenobi's one appearance on this show before he dies. A horrible death.
Gotta go out with a bang, I guess.
Yeah, I know, yes. On a crappy radio show. We're going to call it a radio show. I refuse to use the P word. Don't say it. Don't say it. Anyway, so we were supposed to talk about what we were going to talk about, but we decided not to do that. And by deciding, I mean we just forgot to talk about it before we hit record. So I think it's probably better to just sort of talk about the car you've got and sort of how you got it, and maybe start there and maybe tell me a crazy story about anything crazy.
Yeah. Well, I'd actually like to start by saying telling the audience briefly what my first car
Oh yeah, go for
was.
it. Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And thanks for presuming we have an audience. We probably don't have a fan or listeners at all, but just in case, we're making this for you, one listener. Go ahead.
So 16-year-old Ben gets his license, but doesn't immediately get a car. So I was driving my dad's 2001 Christmas tree green Honda Odyssey with over 240,000 miles on it. I didn't want to drive to school in a minivan, so I started searching around for used cars. One day my dad comes home and says, "Hey, this guy in my model airplane club just bought a new Subaru Outback, and he has a 1996 Mercury Grand Marquis. Just wants to get rid of it, and he told me that he'd sell it to you for $1,000." And I'm like,
holy crap.
That's pretty much all my savings at the time, but I want it because it would be a car on my own.
Yeah.
That Saturday,
and it's a sexy beast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic. I actually gave it a male name, Earl, because not to say it's a stereotypical old man name, but
well, it's an old man car. No offense, but
yeah,
yeah, it was. My friend Sarah, her mom had one. We borrowed it once, and one of the neighborhoods we used to drive through back in high school had a speed bump, and I just remember going over a speed bump and having the car just sort of gently rock back and forth about 3 or 4 oscillations.
Yeah.
And we're talking like several hundred feet past the speed bump. You're still oscillating.
You hit it at the resonant frequency.
Exactly. It just explodes.
Not to expose too much of my engineering side.
No. We don't know what you do. It's top secret. Anyway.
But yeah, that car, it was medium willow metallic. Ooh. Green exterior with faded clear coat on the roof.
Oh, nice.
With a olive green velour interior.
Double green?
Yes.
Wait, did it have a vinyl hardtop too?
No, it did not have a Landau top.
Okay, sorry.
For better or for worse, take that at face value.
I can tell you my uncle, whose name I will not say so he doesn't get in trouble and lose his pension. Excuse me, he used to work at Ford in Lorain, Ohio for like 40 years, and he told me straight up that the cars that had the vinyl hardtop, at least in the 70s, in the 60s it was sort of a looks thing, but really in the 70s when they had that top, it's because they had shitty welds or something, and they were just like, this is never going to keep rain out, so they would just slap a vinyl hardtop on. And they also told me they used to draw like lewd pictures and seam sealer in the trunk and stuff where no one would ever see it, like up in the corners.
That's amazing.
Actually, I'm sorry, it wasn't in the trunk, it was like behind the door cards where, like, a regular customer would never see it, I'm not going to say what it is, but let's just say it could be like a twig and some berries. That's probably what they were drawing.
Yeah.
But anyway.
As one does.
So this car, that was your first car. It was sort of like most people's last car. When they're 90, they have one, but you went with it first. So let's talk about your current car. Tell us what you've got, if you've done anything to it, and then after that, compare it to your first car. So what do you got?
I have a 2006 Volkswagen GTI.
How many doors?
It is a 2-door.
Yes.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, take it any way you want. It is the dual clutch, not the stick shift. Mm-hmm. I got it because the car in between the Grand Marquis and the GTI, a 96 Mustang GT, which is still in the family, became so unreliable that it's still running today by
90s Fords.
by some force of nature. It just became a giant money pit.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need something that I can bring up to college that I won't have to worry about breaking down every day.
Yeah.
And that has air conditioning, anti-lock brakes, working airbags, and gets okay gas mileage. It doesn't burn a quart of oil every 500 miles.
What kind of mileage do you get?
The GTI?
Yeah.
At 65 on the highway currently,
yeah,
the way it sits, 33 and a half,
that's not bad.
34.
So what have you done to the car?
So First thing I did, I got the Mark 7 GTI's wheels and tires.
Yeah.
Then I deleted the resonator because I am a broke college student and I can't afford an actual exhaust. I have tuned it.
I just realized you have so much cooler of a car than I did when I was in college. But go ahead. You tuned it, right? You did it too.
Yeah, I have an APR Stage 1.
What happened after you did that tune?
Yeah, I was told that it had the revision PCV valve on it, which is part of the emission system on it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. That failed. Then the valve cover gasket failed, and then the brake vacuum or the vacuum booster pump failed. So
how much did the tune cost you in the end?
Total like $1,400.
But it was supposed to cost how much if it didn't break everything?
$700.
Yeah, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just had an experience all of you will be familiar with, which is you think something's going to cost one mount and it costs twice as much.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, there's more.
Yeah, no, and I like every young kid does, I put a air quote cold air intake on it, and it was turned out to be way louder than I wanted to. So even if I'm accelerating normally, people think I'm trying to race them because as soon as I let off the gas, you hear a blow off valve sound, even though it still has the stock diverter valve on it. It's
so this is an education moment because this show is for stupidity mainly, but can you explain the difference between a diversion valve and a blow off valve?
Oh my god,
I'm making you do this again.
I'm not an automotive engineer.
Yeah.
I am studying chemical engineering.
Don't tell us, it's too much information.
Too late.
Okay.
So I may not get this 100% correct, but from my understanding, a diverter valve, when you let off the gas in a turbocharged car, diverts that air back to the intake system, whereas a blow-off valve vents it to atmosphere. And
it makes you sound cool if you're a teenager.
Yeah. It got old. That sound got old to me after about a day, so I'm like, I guess I'll turn up the radio a bit louder.
It sounds like the car, like blow-off valves, and to all of you with blow-off valves that you've, quote unquote, upgraded to make them louder or whatever. To me, it just sounds like someone politely farting. Like they're not really going for the fart. They're like, I'm gonna try to sneak it out a little.
My exhaust farts when you upshift.
Well, that's kind of cool.
No, I was gonna say I think it sounds more like the car sneezing. Like on those really high, like ridiculously high horsepower Supras, where it's like.
Do that again, please.
No.
That was, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to hear that again, please rewind.
Just rewind it. Through the magic of technology, you can play that an infinite amount of times.
An infant amount of times.
Precisely. And make a meme out of me.
Yes, you will be memeful. And so, hey, so I want to ask. I've just come up with something we're going to try to do at the end of segments when we're interviewing someone. And I don't know if it's going to become sort of a standard thing or not because Brent and Charlie were unable to show up today because they're lame. Actually, they have girlfriends. But anyway. One's
married, actually.
I guess girls are cool. Girls are pretty cool. They're out there, man. Keep that radar on. So I want to ask you a question. So, obviously you go to Charlottesville Cars and Coffee a lot. And you've heard, I don't know the order that we're going to put all this stuff together, but you've probably heard that one segment we did about the cars at Cars and Coffee that are not ours that we would love to take home. And so we have this thing, we always kind of do it unofficially, and maybe this will become a standard thing we do at the end when we're interviewing someone, maybe not, whatever. But, of the cars that are usually there, the ones that are not your car, which one would you take home? You can think about it, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's tough, man.
I haven't been there in
just a
month, but
you know what I mean.
Yeah,
it's all time.
Yeah. From a recent experience, I'd probably say
blue Fiesta ST. Yes. No, sorry, that's my car.
That's a little too close to my GTI.
Got you.
In terms of type of car.
Yeah.
I'd probably say a Cayman GT4.
Has there been one there?
Yeah, I've seen
Okay,
it. I've seen a Cayman GT4 there.
Which color? You got to. We're talking about like a specific car. Like if there was a white one there one time or something.
Yeah. From what I recall, it was blue. Sorry, I don't know Porsche color codes.
Well, it's just okay. See, right now, somewhere Charlie, who eventually is going to hear this, is laughing because you brought up Porsche codes, and he and I have this running thing where I find it incredibly German and frustrating that Porsche uses like random number sequences to identify their cars. It just drives me insane. But regardless, so that's cool. So that's a great choice, right? I mean, that's a solid choice. Although the only correct answer is Bob's GT350, but.
Yeah.
Oh.
I wouldn't take home what shout out to regular car reviews. I wouldn't take home a Wing-a-Dinga car as my first choice. I have to have a modern, more reliable car, but then I can get a Wing-a-Dinga or a Wamba-Damba car. So.
All right, well, Ben, GTI Ben Kenobi, thank you for joining us, and come back sometime.
Pleasure to be here.